You are listening to the Wealth Formula Podcast with Buck Joffrey. Get ready to change your life.
Welcome, everybody. This is Buck Joffrey with the Wealth Formula Podcast. Today, I'd like to start out by reminding you that there is a home base for this podcast called wealthformula.com. Lots of free stuff to get there. Lots of free books and downloads, etc. And the other thing that you can do there is sign up for Wealth Formula's Accredited Investor Club. Now, this is something that is important for those of you who are listeners who actually meet the qualifications of being accredited investors. Now, what is an accredited investor? It sounds like something you have to apply for, but in fact, it's not. It's something that you either are or you are not. Sort of like being pregnant, right? You don't have to apply for it. You either are or you aren't. And that is the definition of accredited investor is simple. You make $200,000 per year for at least 2 years, or you do so filing jointly, and then you have $300,000 per year for 2 years, or you have a net worth of over $1 million, not including your overvalued home and assets. So that's basically it. If you meet those criteria, you are an accredited investor, and you can go to wealthformula.com and sign up for Accredited Investor Club, because after all, who does not want to be part of a club? Now, then seriously, the reason to do that is because we talk a lot about concepts of creating wealth on this show, and you there's a good chance you may be an accredited investor if you listen to this show, because we really tend to focus on things and problems for people who are, either already in that range of wealth or are getting close or at least aspiring to do so. If you're there and you're listening, at some point, you have to get off the sidelines and take the leap, and that involves being part of a club and putting lazy money to use. So again, go to wealthformula.com, sign up for Accredited Investor Club. It's just called Investor Club, actually, but it is for accredited investors, and then you will get on a call with me after that, and we'll talk about more. We'll kind of go through the onboarding process for that. So other than that, the other thing I will tell you is for those of you, even, with or without the accredited status, there is another group that is sort of the inner circle, and that is called Wealth Formula Network. Wealth Formula Network is a membership. It is a brotherhood, a sisterhood, brother and sisterhood, that basically what we do there is we have a course that creates the foundation for everything that, we want everybody to be caught up with. And that's a course that's taught by some really smart people in taxes and in real estate and asset protection and all that stuff. And then we have a community, and that community is a community online for the most part. Private Facebook group. We have a online portal where we store more additional information. We also have probably the most popular thing, which is biweekly phone calls of our mastermind. They are on Zoom, so we get to look at each other, which is kind of fun as well, so you can actually recognize one another and see each other. For those of you who went to the Scottsdale meeting, it's basically like that, but, on a regular basis. So check that out at wealthformularoadmap.com. Let's leave it at that for the plugs before I start today's show. It's funny. I will say that today happens to be my youngest daughter, Clementine. It's her 4th birthday. As of this recording, at least. It'll probably get released, obviously, later than that, maybe next week sometime. But it's her 4th birthday, and I just think about all the things in my life and in your life that have changed, since you were 4 or 5 years old. It's insane. I was born in 1973, And I remember being 4, and I remember what the world was like then. I remember black and white TVs. I remember the lack of internet. I remember phone booths. I mean, all this stuff, it just, it's crazy how it changes, right? And our whole paradigms for life and what our expectations are and what our reality changes dynamically. But, there are some paradigms that seem to perpetuate without question for centuries, without being questioned. And, it used to be, for example, that in most places in the world, the majority of places in the world, specific religions were mandated by the government or whatever it was, like a kingdom or whatever, to its people. And the heretics were persecuted. Of course, it's not to say that doesn't exist in many parts of the world still, but the point is that a large part of the world, including us, of course, does not see that as a simple status quo or anything that's even acceptable. If you live in the United States, for example, you would feel very uncomfortable, no matter what religion you are, I presume, with the idea that the government got to choose your place of worship, who you worship, what you ate, what you drank, and what you wore. Now, why is that? Why is that? Because it certainly wasn't that way, and you go back to Roman times, right? I mean, the Romans basically changed religions based on who the emperor was. I mean, that's basically what it was, right? Well, again, so why is that? There are certain things like religion that are very difficult to change, or they're difficult to doubt. The answer to that, again, is that we tend to let outdated paradigms perpetuate without questioning them. They become part of a collective, conventional reality that few even, that it doesn't even cross your mind to question them. And then one day, there's an awakening. And, maybe that's from a technological breakthrough. Maybe that's a radical new idea like the United States of America. And the next thing you know, you've got the separation of church and state, and that has become something that we now expect is our new normal. Now, why do I go into all of this? Well, I'm going to take a leap here and say that I believe that Bitcoin represents the first modern step in separating not church from state, but money from state. Now, I've been watching and studying this space closely, and I have come to the conclusion that Bitcoin is real and it's not going anywhere. I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but it's not going anywhere. It is not a flash in the pan. It is not a fad, and Warren Buffett's wrong. It's not rat poison. When you look around and you see the infrastructure that's being built around Bitcoin, for example, at the institutional level, you've got literally the same companies. For example, the Intercontinental Exchange that owns the New York Stock Exchange is releasing a cryptocurrency, specifically Bitcoin exchange, right? You've got smart money that is starting to invest in the space, like university endowments, the Yale University Endowment, the Stanford University Endowment. Listen, this is really not, I'm not really talking about price action here on Bitcoin, because the reality is it doesn't matter what the price of Bitcoin is today. It's the value of what's going on and how it's going to change the world tomorrow. And that, when you think of what it potentially represents, makes it grossly undervalued right now. In my opinion, if you don't take at least the time and study this and its implications, you're going to regret it. Now, again, if you do that and you come away from it and saying, you know what, I don't buy it, don't worry about it. Yeah, I'm going to skip this episode. By all means, go ahead and do so. But, I don't think it's a good idea. I think this is something that is here to stay. And that's why I wanted to have today's guest on the show for a podcast interview. So this is a former Wall Street guy turned Bitcoin purist. I've interviewed him before on my cryptocurrency podcast, Consensus Network. But today I'm going to have him back, and I'm going to actually play this interview on both the podcasts. His name's Tone Vays. And for those of you who don't know, he's, again, basically a former traditional Wall Street guy, a trader. And now he is, an absolute evangelist for the Bitcoin cause. And you're going to need to, you're going to want to listen to this. You're going to need to learn about this. And you can learn a lot from this guy. So when we come back, we've got Tone Vays. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Today, my guest on, this is going to be on Wealth Formula Podcast and Consensus Network, is Tone Vays. Tone was on Consensus Network a couple of months back, and that was right around the time when, I don't know if it was a couple months. It seems like time's going on forever right now if you follow Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies in general. But at that time, Bitcoin was hanging out around 6,500, and everybody thought 6,000 was the bottom, etc. And Tone came on to talk about Bitcoin, and he was just talking about it to the Consensus Network audience. I'm bringing him back today, and I want to start from the beginning because this is going out to Wealth Formula Podcast as well. First of all, Tone, tell us a little bit about your background, because you're coming at this from a different approach, I think, than a lot of Bitcoin people, which is that you come from a Wall Street background. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. So I started out actually being a high school teacher in math and science, and I didn't like that. So after 1 year of teaching people that didn't want to be in my classroom, I decided to make some money and signed up for a program in financial engineering, not really knowing much about finance. I got a degree in financial engineering and started looking for a job on Wall Street, but it was actually difficult. I had no work experience. That's also when I learned how to trade around the same time. So I actually started trading first. And like most traders that, I would say like almost all traders, the first portfolio you start trading, you end up kind of blowing it up by making too many stupid mistakes. That happened to me, though my mistakes, and this is the really funny part, is I ended up running out of money in my portfolio because I continued to short the real estate market. And this was between 2006 going into 2007. And just as I ran out of money in my trading portfolio, I had some profitable trades, but I'm like, this thing is going to tank. This thing is going to tank. I'm going to make a lot of it.
Tone, I think our connection, Tone, I think our connection
eventually just completely ran out of money. So I had to go get a job, and that job was actually at Bear Stearns. As ironic as that sounds, the company that blew up about 9 months later because of the real estate crash, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when I got absorbed by JP Morgan, and I've worked in that industry. It was actually a risk analysis industry for about 9 years. And but throughout that whole time, I continued to trade. I had a better job now. I was able to build up another trading portfolio. This time around, I was trading more profitably. I eventually quit that job in 2015 with a combination of investing in some businesses, trading my own portfolio, and really enjoyed this Bitcoin thing, speaking at conferences. And the end result is I now go around the world, continue to speak at conferences. I'm too busy to trade my portfolios, so I'm taking a little bit of a break. But I did start doing videos about trading and looking at the price. And you were talking about the $6,500 area. I was being made fun of for about 3 to 4 months. People were making fun of me because I kept saying 6,000 is going to break, it's going to go down hard, we're going to fall at least 50%. and everyone was making fun of me until we broke 6,000 and it fell 50% in a week. And after that, people weren't making fun of me as much anymore. But I still make fun of the hair though.
Yeah, there
And
you go.
But anyway, so now I go around the world speaking at conferences. I start my own conferences now. I did a conference in Vegas in January. My second conference is going to be next week in Malta, called Understanding Bitcoin. And I teach people how to be better traders. I teach them the mistakes that I used to make, 10, 15 years ago when I started out. Teach people technical analysis, teach them how to do chart reading. And that's pretty much what I'm up to these days.
So, Tone, what was it about Bitcoin that got you so interested? I mean, you are you're clearly, sort of not only a hardcore Bitcoin guy, but you're a Bitcoin maximalist. But let's specifically, what is it about Bitcoin that has got you so convinced that this is something?
So this is actually a great question. If you can read my shirt, let's see if I can move up here. I am in Egypt. I really hope my internet connection holds up.
Yeah, it's not been great.
My shirt reads, unconfiscatable, censorship-resistant store of value. And that is what got me interested. And it's actually in that order. The first time I ever heard about Bitcoin was from Max Kaiser's show on RT, where he talked about it as being a savior for WikiLeaks in early 2011, even before the Silk Road was launched. And because WikiLeaks got cut off from Visa, MasterCard, and PayPal, and they had to find a way to get donations in order to keep their servers running. So that's an example of censorship-resistant value transfer. The second example of that was the Silk Road case. Now, Silk Road didn't really interest me that much. I didn't even know about it because that wasn't part of my life, nor did I have a need for it. But what really got me interested was the word unconfiscatable. And I realized that Bitcoin is the only unconfiscatable asset humans have ever owned in our history when the Cyprus events happened of April 2013, when the European Union decided to just confiscate 50% of your money that was sitting there in a bank account above 100,000 euros. That's when I realized that you need to have at least some of your wealth in something that is unconfiscatable. And this concept of unconfiscatable, it's so hard for people to understand. I'm saying like humans, because like nothing in history, whether it's a human, whether it's an animal, it doesn't matter. Nothing you have ever owned has ever been unconfiscatable. And the word didn't even exist, right? It's still the word. The word unconfiscatable is not in the dictionary. About 9 months ago, I was able to get the .com, unconfiscatable.com. I have a conference called Unconfiscatable. This word just does not exist in the English language because we've never had anything that was unconfiscatable. And I think when people realize this, Bitcoin will really, really change the world. To me, that is the most important property of Bitcoin. But Bitcoin is also a store of value. What makes it a store of value is the fact that there will only be 21 million Bitcoin. And while I've always gone back and forth in my economic career and understanding, do we really need inflation? How is the government doing monetary policy? Is that the best form of running an economy? It seems to have been doing okay for the last 100 years. Look at all the global innovation we've had under easy money. So it's hard to deny that. And look at how much wealth, with the stock market. Everyone loves to point to gold, like, hey, a gold coin would have bought you a suit in the year 1900 and it buys you the same suit today. That's true. But if in the year 1900 you sold that gold coin, put it in the Dow Jones, you can probably own multiple suit factories right now. Maybe even have the money to buy almost every suit in the world, right? So it's hard to argue with the last 100 years of monetary policy. But after reading the book, The Bitcoin Standard, Saifedean Ammous really changed my mind on the need for sound money like gold. So I do believe Bitcoin is a great store of value, and this property of 21 million Bitcoin and Bitcoin's unchangeable monetary policy is another thing that continues to attract me to Bitcoin and hopefully other people soon.
So, Tone, it brings me to another question, I think, which I think is a useful question to get perspective on, which is, in your view, is Bitcoin money or is it a storage of value? Because it seems that even within the Bitcoin community, we've got these guys who are on the Bitcoin Cash and all that, the other guys who are trying to make this scale into something that that can make it something that would really be a daily use type of thing, where it's money. Or is it a storage of value the same way maybe you build a second layer on top of it and use Bitcoin as the quote unquote gold standard, and you have some kind of transactions on top of the blockchain and a second layer, not that dissimilar to necessarily having like a dollar that was pegged to gold. What is it? What, in your view, which is it, or is it still to be determined?
No, it's both. It's both. The second layer scaling of Bitcoin is nothing like dollar being backed by gold. Your second layer scaling of Bitcoin is still the transfer of Bitcoin. It's just doesn't settle to the Bitcoin blockchain until later on when you want to close the channel. So it's not a comparison of dollars being backed by gold. It's both, but in order to be really good money, you need to have the store of value property. I mean, the Venezuelan currency is probably the best money we have in the world by the definition of the Bitcoin Cash people and the big blockers. The Venezuelan currency should be the best money in the world, because as soon as you get your hands on the Venezuelan currency, you want to immediately spend it, because if you hold it for even a few hours, it could significantly depreciate in value. So that's not what you want from your currency. You want to be able to save that currency if you want to save it, and not only have it not go down in purchasing power, but potentially go up in purchasing power. Now, does that mean you will be less willing to spend it? The answer is sure. You will be less willing to spend it if you have other crappier options to spend. But the moment you start earning a living in Bitcoin, the only currency you can now spend is Bitcoin. So if you're Tone Vase, you're constantly trying to spend Bitcoin because that's how I earn a living. So that's a huge misunderstanding. Of course, it can be both, and the dynamic goes back and forth. There are instances where everybody wants to spend it. When the value of Bitcoin goes up and there is a lot of hype around Bitcoin, businesses want to start. People in general are getting interested. Those people own businesses. They want to suddenly start accepting Bitcoin. Also, when Bitcoin goes up, people that hold Bitcoin are richer, so they want to buy more things. So they want to spend that Bitcoin. On the flip side, right now we're in the 14th month of the bear market, 15th month of the bear market. So right now it's, you don't really want to spend that Bitcoin because you think it's near the lows, and lots of there's interest is dying out. Many of the businesses that started accepting Bitcoin a few years ago are now stopping accepting Bitcoin because no one is coming in and paying with it. Well, and this is what I don't understand. When people say you have to incentivize people to spend your Bitcoin, well, the best incentive to spend the Bitcoin is inflation. And that's what the government does. Is that what you want? In fact, other forms of cryptocurrency, whether it's Bitcoin Cash, Bitcoin SV, Litecoin, it doesn't matter. All these other cryptocurrencies is useless inflation on top of Bitcoin. So if someone is going to argue with me saying that Litecoin has a future in our cryptocurrency world, what they're really saying is, I believe in inflation, and the government has been doing the right thing for the last 100 years. I'm a believer in the Fed. I want inflationary monetary policy, and I will spend the money that is inflating the fastest. So therefore, you'll be spending that Litecoin because you have no reason to hold on to it.
So, you're clearly, I think what you would call a Bitcoin maximalist for sure, right? And you've expressed your dislike, distaste, or disbelief rather, in a number of projects, even projects that I think a lot of people would call fairly, not exotic, like for example, Ethereum. Can you explain your perspective on this? I look at some of these blockchain projects, for example, in the gaming world. For example, there's an interesting one that I just think is an interesting project called Worldwide Asset Exchange, and it's solving fundamental problems that are unique to the world in that world, right? Of non-fungible, items, things like that. Cross-border trade and, basically tokenizing virtual assets, things like that. Isn't there a role in for some of these projects, other than just Bitcoin? Or if not, why not?
Well, to me, so let's go back to the definition of a blockchain. I've read the Satoshi white paper many times. The word blockchain is never mentioned. The word blockchain is a buzzword. It was picked up from the code where Satoshi used the word blockchain in a comment describing the process of mining blocks with proof of work and attaching those blocks to one another, forming a chain of blocks he called a blockchain. The reason why the word blockchain ever became popular is because some people didn't like the association of Bitcoin to the gray market, like the Silk Road or WikiLeaks or simple protection of your own money. So they clung to this word blockchain without understanding what the innovation that Satoshi invented. Satoshi invented an ability to solve the double spending problem in computers. Prior to Bitcoin, every digital message, every digital piece of data you ever sent was simply a copy of that data. With Bitcoin, you're able to actually send the data. That's all Bitcoin is. Bitcoin is the finite transfer digitally. The moment the send button is hit, digital data called Bitcoins leave your electronic system, whether it's your computer, your cell phone, whatever, your USB stick, and it goes to another address that you have no control of. And that is what makes it unconfiscatable and censorship resistant. So if some company is telling you that, well, first of all, that company, if a company is telling you that they're using a blockchain, there are two fundamental things that you need to first investigate as a person listening to someone trying to sell you a blockchain. One of them is conceptual and the other one is technical. On the conceptual side, they need to convince you that a blockchain is needed, that you need unconfiscatable, censorship-resistant value transfer. Let me tell you where it's not needed. It's not needed in, say, things like real estate property ownership. Because unless you want to accidentally delete the ownership of your property, or you want to accidentally send the ownership of that property to your neighbor who now owns that property, or you want some government official to input into the blockchain the fact that he now owns that property and you sold it to him, and you treat that as unconfiscatable and censorship resistant, you are basically screwed with putting real estate on the blockchain, okay? It is totally not useful for most things. The only time it's useful is when you want to have full control of that digital data. And more importantly, it doesn't have a physical form, because if it has a physical form, it's confiscatable. If it's confiscatable, your blockchain is meaningless. Okay, your real estate is confiscatable by someone with a bigger gun. Okay, they can take that land from you. The government can take that land from you. Having it on a blockchain is meaningless. If there was a blockchain 300 years ago in the USA and a Native American comes to you and your home where your family has now lived in for the last 100 years and says the blockchain says that I actually own this land, what are you going to do? You're going to hand it over to him? No, you're going to say, my family's been taking care of this land for 100 years. It's now my land, right? Like the blockchain doesn't help you at all. It's totally useless. So that is the fundamental view of a blockchain. Now let's talk about the technical view of a blockchain. To me, the only blockchain that has proven itself to be functional and actually abide by these properties of being decentralized, unconfiscatable, censorship resistant is the Bitcoin blockchain. All other blockchains just fail. They're all, in my mind, centralized. So if someone is going to convince me or you that a blockchain is going to revolutionize something, anything, right? The technical question you have to ask them is, what blockchain are you talking about? Because if their answer is any blockchain other than Bitcoin, I'm going to call bullshit, because Ethereum is a centralized database that has already proven that they can reverse transactions, and it is not unconfiscatable. And very soon, it's not even going to be proof of work. It's going to be some database proof of stake. So to me, the fundamental side, I can probably, in 95% of cases, I will explain to a company why they don't need and don't want a blockchain. And even if they do need a blockchain, if they're not using the Bitcoin blockchain for their purpose, they're going to find themselves in a lot of trouble, because their blockchain is going to hurt them in the long run more than help, because it will turn into just another centralized database with all the disadvantages of a blockchain without any of the benefits. So that is, now people seem to demonize people like me that are using science and logic to explain why Bitcoin may be the only thing that will succeed, and the other two extremes, to quote my friend Giacomo Zucco, you have the no-coiner who thinks all blockchains are useless, including Bitcoin. That is your Nouriel Roubini and many of the others. And then you have somebody like Vitalik Buterin or anyone else that believes in an altcoin who thinks that Bitcoin is so useless and not revolutionary that they can sit down and in 1 hour create a better version. And that is a complete misunderstanding of what Bitcoin provides us.
Right. So I think the misunderstanding of a lot of, at least people, what you're saying is that Bitcoin, as a Bitcoin maximalist, you're not saying that there are not situations in which a blockchain is not valuable. For example, you may have right now a very valuable project or idea, but it's being built on top of Ethereum. You're saying that, okay, well, first prove to me that the project needs to or benefits from or has some increased efficiency and from using a blockchain. And if you do that, then build it on top of the Bitcoin blockchain. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. And one of the reasons why Ethereum became so popular is that Ethereum did provide a use case for a blockchain. That use case was for all kinds of crazy ideas to separate common people from their money. That's what the ICO boom was. So 99% of every single ICO I've looked at, I considered it a totally useless project. And these people felt that they deserved millions of dollars of funding for their project. And because VCs and people that are actually smart weren't willing to give them that kind of money, they went after the general public, that wanted to speculate and just sell the token in order to profit. So what the Ethereum business model is basically to recreate Ethereum's, because that's how Ethereum, the only reason why Ethereum even exists today is because I believe they sold an unregistered security in order to fund the project. It's like, hey, we're going to give you this digital asset, you pay us a bunch of money, and we're going to build this, digital platform. To me, this was immoral and illegal according to regulation and security laws, which is why I never participated in the Ethereum crowd sale and warned people that, hey, this is an illegal security that they're building, that they funded to build it. And now their project has one use case and is to, encourage the illegal creation of securities. But the regulators are now starting to get a handle on this. And if you've done an ICO last year, you should be nervous.
Right. So since the last time I talked to you, I started following your channel. I also started following Tyler Jenks. You do a lot of, looks like you do a lot of things together and have some interesting perspectives. And at the time that you were on the show, and we talked about this before, it seemed like 6,000 was the bottom. Everybody was talking about 6,000 being the bottom. You and I didn't talk about price. We really just talked about the virtues of Bitcoin, et cetera. And so what I didn't realize at that time, despite your overall bullish feeling towards Bitcoin, is that you were very bearish on the price of Bitcoin and have been predicting a big correction throughout that time, even though we'd already gone from near 20,000 down to 6,000. What made you so sure that we hadn't finished that bottom?
So a couple of things, and look, I always wanted to be wrong. I want to see Bitcoin go up. I didn't sell my Bitcoin at the top, even though I was talking about it. I just held on to it because I have a long-term time horizon. For me, it was all about technical analysis. I've spent 15 years trading, and I've learned to trust my charts and probabilities. And it was, while fundamentals had something to do with it, 80% of my confidence in the fact that Bitcoin was going to crash from 6,000 down to 3, and I still think that we're going to go sub 3,000 as well sometime this year. And all of that has to do with the technical picture. Though I will say that right now, the technical picture isn't as clean. I was 80% sure from a TA perspective that because between Bitcoin being at about 15,000 to 6,000 over a 6 or an 8 month span, Bitcoin formed something in technical analysis we call a descending triangle. Trading a descending triangle is one of my favorite things to do in trading. And the descending triangle basically said Bitcoin was due for a big crash in October of 2017. So I put on a big short position in October of 2017. That position did not work out until November of 2017. So it took about a month for it to break down. But that's okay. I didn't get my time perfect, but I got my price pretty damn well. So it was mostly about technicals, but fundamentals play into it as well. Right now, the technical picture is a little more 50-50. I am looking for a bounce back to 5,000. I want to see a rejection at 5,000 and then go sub 3,000 from there. But from a fundamental perspective, while Bitcoin continues to strengthen and look amazingly good in the code, under the hood, it looks great. The perception of Bitcoin is absolutely terrible. And I think that the fact that people still believe in these altcoins continue to drag Bitcoin down. I think that Bitcoin will not enter another bull market until Bitcoin separates from all the altcoins. The day I see Bitcoin go up in price and things like Ethereum, Litecoin, Monero, Cardano, everything else continue to stay down or even better, go down, Bitcoin has some trouble. My best comparison to this is what happened after the 2000 NASDAQ crash. People don't realize that NASDAQ was at $5,000 in valuation of all the tech companies when the top came. We did not cross 5,000 again until sometime late in 2013. If you inflation adjust it, we probably only crossed the new all-time highs like last year in the NASDAQ, in the tech sector. So what, 16, 17 years it took. So imagine that. Look, how much better is the internet in 2015 versus the year 2000? And yet the tech sector was valued about the same. And that's because in the year 2000, people believed in .coms that had no clients, no revenue, basically just a website, but it was trading publicly on the market for $100. They were just useless companies. This is how I see everything in crypto other than Bitcoin. And the NASDAQ was only going to recover with the good companies that were left. And I believe the same thing will happen in the crypto space. Only in the crypto space, it's simpler to me. It's just going to be Bitcoin. There is a small probability that one or two other cryptocurrencies or projects are going to be very valuable in the future. But when you have 3,000 to choose from, I am not in the business of guessing which 3 out of 3,000 it's going to be. I will ride the Bitcoin horse all the way back up, but until fundamentally that changes. Also, in the last bear market, like everyone was a Bitcoiner, everyone was a Bitcoin maximalist. 90% of the people were only talking about Bitcoin. Today, the average person believes in nonsense like Ripple and Ethereum and all this other junk. And the community is so fragmented today compared to what it was in the last bear market. And I think until the community realizes that the only innovation in the space is Bitcoin, and not only is that Bitcoin blockchain going to be the backbone of everyone that actually needs a blockchain, and the value of only Bitcoin starts to rise, it's going to be very difficult to end the bear market.
So, it's interesting. I see a lot of things happening at the macro level, in terms of the news, right? That make Bitcoin seem to inch forwards, at least in the mainstream. Like, for example, you have, Wall Street involvement, the Intercontinental Exchange releasing Backed, its partnership with Starbucks, university pensions getting involved.
Yeah, can I weigh in on that real quick? So Backed has been delayed for like the third time. No one knows when it's actually going to launch. The Starbucks is a little overblown. They were just an investor, like the investing division arm of Starbucks just threw a little bit of money, probably because the people at that side of the company are probably friends with people at the New York Stock Exchange. So the Starbucks thing was really overblown. It doesn't mean that Starbucks is going to start accepting Bitcoin. These two divisions of a giant company have absolutely nothing to do with each other. And also, Backed isn't really going to revolutionize anything. Backed is just another exchange. In fact, I think it's a downgrade. It's an upgrade technologically. Backed has very smart people in the exchange space. They understand exchanges, unlike, say, Coinbase. I think Coinbase is a terrible company. They don't understand exchanges. They have no experience in it. But Coinbase gives you your Bitcoin immediately. Backed will only give it to you once a day. So it's not even any kind of an upgrade to what we currently have, other than simply more professionalism.
So, I know what you're saying. I get that there's, maybe some of these things aren't as a big deal as they may appear, whether it's Backed or Starbucks, all these things. But there's clearly some, appears to be some acceptance at sort of the larger money, the endowments are getting involved. You've got some more mainstream acceptance, and the idea that maybe that Bitcoin's not a flash in the pan that's going to disappear tomorrow, and maybe it's worth something, worth looking at something, which is admittedly, you have to admit, if you said that 5 years ago, people would be laughing at you, right? So how do you take those kinds of movements and apply those to your prediction models? With technical analysis, how does that affect it, if at all? Because as I understand it, you are still pretty, you still believe that Bitcoin's going to go under 3,000 before it ever rebounds. How do you put those two together?
Sure. Tyler Jenks and myself are both believers and, well, believers probably not the best word, practitioners and like in trust of our ability to read charts with technical analysis. Because it doesn't matter what people say, it only matters what people do. And what people do reflects in the price of that asset.
Right.
So throughout the 2016 and 17 bear market, I can name you infinite amount of bad news that was completely ignored. From Bitcoin is going to fork in two, Bitcoin is slow, Bitcoin doesn't work, people panicking, the Chinese regulators showed up, shut everything down in China, hacks constantly, and none of that mattered, and the price kept going up and up and up and up. And markets eventually top when there's no one willing to buy at that price. And the opposite is also true. The market will eventually bottom when there's nobody to sell at these low prices. And I still think there are plenty of people to panic and sell at these prices. I kind of like these guys, but I know I've been using them a little bit as a, punching bag. And that's people like Mike Novogratz and Tim Draper.
Yeah.
Tim Draper famously bought all the Silk Road Bitcoin at about $450. They're probably sitting on hundreds of thousands of Bitcoins bought for their clients at maybe $1,000. Mike Novogratz, I believe, bought most of his Bitcoin somewhere between $3,000 and $4,000. So he's getting very close to that break-even period. And what happens is when you're a money manager and there's pressure on you to make money for your clients. And when they're looking at you and why didn't you get out at the top? What are you doing? And well, now your position is in the red. You were up, 500%? And now you're losing me money on this position. Pressure comes from your investors. And if you don't make your investors happy, they're going to take their money and they're going to go elsewhere. So I can still see people with lots of Bitcoin panicking and selling. And the news doesn't really matter. It's basically when there's nobody left to sell and the Bitcoin has migrated to those that believe in it going into the future from the current low prices. And that's pretty much how I see it. But like I said, at the moment, the charts are somewhat neutral. I actually am using more longer term charts and fundamental analysis to have those low targets. But the last technical analysis target for me has played itself out. Now, if we bounce up to 5,000 and get rejected hard by a moving average in that $5,000 zone, my technical analysis will come back in line with my fundamental view that people have not yet felt the pain of what it's like to be in a true bear market after a bubble, because people haven't learned their lesson. Every time I see Bitcoin jump up, 10% or 15%, I see Ethereum go up 30%, 35%. I see Litecoin go up 40%, 50%. I see things like Ripple, which is a totally useless token. Again, illegal security, if you ask me, my opinion. That sucker can go up like 200-300%. Until that stops, it tells me fundamentally that people haven't learned what is a blockchain. And until people learn what is a blockchain, I think the entire space is going to continue to go down until people have learned their lesson.
So I get this question a lot from people because we talk once in a while. We talk about Bitcoin, even on the Wealth Formula podcast, which is on now. And they see these numbers and they're like, well, it's $3,000-$4,000. Okay, I'm convinced. I want some exposure to this stuff. And I know you're not giving financial advice, but given what, say you didn't own any Bitcoin today, you're not an active trader, but you want to start accumulating some exposure. What would you do right now if you own no Bitcoin, but wanted to to buy some and hold it over the next 5 years, would you start volume averaging right now, or would you really wait? I mean, would you wait, until you got into sub 3,000 numbers?
I'd buy it right now. I always tell people the best time to buy Bitcoin was yesterday. Now, the ideal way to do it is not to just, take a chunk of your money out of other investments and go out and buy Bitcoin, because if it still drops from here, you're going to be grossly disappointed. And you got to be real careful. You really want to put in what you're willing to lose, and you have to understand the protocol. Now, the best way to accumulate Bitcoin is if you have a business and you can find a way to slowly just accumulate Bitcoin without it taking a chunk of your financial assets. Here's an example. My barber, this is how I should have known my barber. I know I never cared so much about hair now that I cut it, but I haven't had one in a while. Can't wait to get back and see my barber. My barber is an old friend of mine. Known him for 15 years now, probably, something like that. It's been a while. And he wasn't a barber back then. Only been a barber about 5 years, maybe. I started going to him kind of recently. And I should have known it was the top, when your barber calls you up frantically trying to buy a Bitcoin from you when the Bitcoin is like $16,000 each.
Right.
Okay, so I did my best. I told him this is not the time to buy. But hey, if you're gonna buy it from somewhere, might as well buy from me. And but I convinced him into only buying half a Bitcoin. He really wanted a full Bitcoin, which is again mentality that I try to get people out of. It's not about having a whole Bitcoin. Everyone wants to hold one Bitcoin. So I talked him out of buying a whole Bitcoin, but he still wants to get a whole Bitcoin. So how is he gonna get his whole Bitcoin? Well, ever since that $16,000, every time I go to him for a haircut, I pay him in Bitcoin, and he doesn't feel it, right? It's just another haircut in the day, but it's a fancy haircut, trims it all nice, takes care of my beard, so, and I tip him nice because he's a friend of mine. So whenever I'm around, I try to go to him once a week, once every 10 days, and it's just another client during the week. He doesn't even feel the fact that he's getting, $20, $30 worth of Bitcoin every single week that I'm in town. And after a year or two of that starts to accumulate, especially when the price drops to these low levels. And that's a way for someone to slowly accumulate Bitcoin and not even feel that it's happening. So if you have a business that, you have a lot of clients paying a little bit of money, see if you can squeeze some Bitcoin out of it a little bit so that it doesn't affect your bottom line whatsoever. And that's the best way to slowly accumulate. And then you won't be upset whatever price it goes to.
So give me your projections for the rest of the year, 5 years, or whatever you want. I just want to get some idea of what you think the history how this is going to play out, and if you have any sense of the timeline, because as you mentioned, we've been in winter for a long time here for over a year.
So when the bear market started, when I declared that Bitcoin is going to fall, that was in January of 2017. I remember exactly when I went bearish, and I went bearish a little bit late. People still give me a hard time about not calling the perfect top, but that's not what trading is. That's guessing. Real trading is money management, and I called the bear market around the second week of January 2017. Now I think I did pretty good. Bitcoin was still about $15,000 at the time, so that wasn't a bad call. And I had my most optimistic price target being 5,000. We've already broken that. My most pessimistic price target was 1,300. And my in between was 3,000. So we made it to my middle target, but my worst case scenario target was 1,300, and that's still on the table. My time projections were, my earliest time was actually like around now, around January, February of this year. That was going to be my earliest time. My latest time was going to be October, November of this year. So the worst case scenario would be a price bottom at the longest time out, right? So hitting 1300 in October is the worst case scenario on both time and price. Now, after, just because the low in price is made, it doesn't mean we're ready to go up. For example, in the 2014 bear market, the low price was in January 6th, like the first week of 2015. But the market didn't start to go up until like October, November of that year. So just because your low price target gets hit, it doesn't mean the bull market is ready to start. So at the moment, it looks like this bear market is just going to drag and drag and drag. I'm looking right now, I'm looking at a bounce to $5,000, get rejected there, and then go sub 3,000. Now, how fast that's going to happen? Really hard to say. I have a time target of October 5th specifically. It's part of a cyclical pie model made by Martin Armstrong that I applied to Bitcoin. So I really love my October 5th date. Just so people know that this isn't crazy talk, the last two key dates, one of them was August 11th, and it was to the week of the user-activated soft fork that changed the history of Bitcoin for the good. That was in August of 2017, August 11th. And the prior target was, I believe, like June 15th or something like that of 2015. They're approximately every 2 years and a couple of months. And that key date corresponded to the week of the Greek banking shutdown, which I believe was instrumental in finally reversing the bear market to a bull market of 2015. So I take these time targets very seriously. And the next one coming up is going to be October 5th of 2019. If that's going to be the bottom in the price of Bitcoin or somewhere in that vicinity, that'd be great. Still long, doesn't mean that the bull market's going to start. So I'm still looking right now, I'm looking at 5,000, a rejection there, going down sub 3,000. How low we're going to get is hard to say right now. 1,300 is my worst case scenario. The most likely scenario is, let's say, something around 1,800, maybe 2,200. But so many people are calling for 2,200 that I find that very unlikely, that so many people are going to be right about that one. And when the bull market is going to start, who knows? I do think that it should start at the latest early 2020, because the 2020 halving is critical. That's when the new mined Bitcoin gets cut in half, and that tends to drive the price up historically. We've already had 2 for 2 in this instance.
And that's January.
So that's pretty much my outlook on things.
That's January 2020 in terms of...
no, that's it's looking more like May, but it's the date is unclear because it's the number of blocks mined. And if a price goes down, hash power comes offline, that slows it down. If the price starts to rise, more miners come online, the hash rate speeds up. So, but right now the projection is around May to June of 2020.
Got it. Well, that's I've been watching you and Tyler closely because I'm interested in accumulating at some point, but I've actually been kind of waiting. Based I should have listened to Tyler. He was on this show, my Consensus Network show, just a few days before the 6,000 down to 3,000 hit. But I kind of held on there, but got out some of my stuff. But anyway, I've been watching you closely. Tell us about your channel, what you're doing, where we can find you, and then also talk about this Malta event. I don't know if it's too late to get out there or what, but we do have listeners who are in Europe and stuff, so it may not be that difficult for some of them.
Yeah, of course. I'll mention the Malta event first. And right now we're getting so much interest in that Malta event because so many people are last minute and they're unsure. Where we had a lot of speakers turn us down, and now some good speakers, not the ones that turned us down, but some additional good speakers are reaching out to us looking to speak at the conference. More people are registering. It's called Understanding Bitcoin. The domain is understandingbtc.com. And there's not going to be any finance at the conference. There's not going to be any regulation at the conference. The conference is specifically tailored to people that already have Bitcoin, and they want to be a more responsible user of Bitcoin. So what are some of the things we're going to do there? We're going to teach people how to why and how they need to set up nodes to help decentralize the network. We're going to educate them on the second layer scaling of Lightning and why they shouldn't be scared of it, and show them how to use it. We're going to talk about how to protect your private keys, very important, how to set up those hardware wallets. And it's basically geared towards a better understanding of Bitcoin. We're going to have some panels talking about what happened last year and why the scaling debate went out of control. We're going to talk about the future and what are some of the new projects coming in. We're going to teach people how to use privacy within Bitcoin, which is getting better every day. So it's geared to people already have decided that Bitcoin is interesting to them, but now they want to be a more confident user that helps the network. So that's why it's called Understanding Bitcoin. And you can get, for my information, everything is Tone Vase, the Tone Vase YouTube channel, Tone Vase on Twitter, Tone Vase on Instagram, even though I don't really use it that much. Tone Vase everywhere, including the website, tonevase.com. It has links to the conferences that I organize, along with trading educational section, my travel schedule, where I'm teach workshops to help people be better traders. All of that you can find at tonevase.com.
Fantastic. Again, Tone, thanks so much for being on the show. I will continue to follow you and follow Tyler, and just keep up the good work.
Thanks, man. Thank you so much. Always glad to be on. And yeah, we'll have to do it again, maybe in less than 9 months, because I think that's how long it's been since Bitcoin's been 6,500.
Yeah, maybe on October 5th.
Yeah, no, that'd be interesting.
We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show, everyone. Of course, we unfortunately did not get to air this show until Tone's event was already over in Malta, and that is too bad, although I suspect that a lot of us would not have necessarily made the trek to Malta. Those of us who've got kids and stuff like that, traveling around in Malta real quick. But you know what? The cool thing is here, it's the whole thing. The whole thing was live telestreamed for free on YouTube, and actually you can go back on Tone Vase's YouTube channel and watch the whole thing for free. Frankly, I got to tell you, I am shocked that he's not charging anything for this, because I mean, he's put a lot of time and effort into this event, and money, and I mean, but the guy, again, listen, this guy is a Bitcoin evangelist. He believes very much in this, and at the very least, we owe him the time to listen to what he has to say and what these guys are saying, because again, I think it's really important. Ignoring this will be a mistake, and I'm not just talking about cryptocurrency bubble or whatever, that cryptocurrency takes off in the next few years again and has a huge run. I mean, obviously Tone doesn't think anything but Bitcoin is worthwhile anyway. I don't necessarily agree 100% on that with him, but anyway, it is an interesting approach. Now, again, make sure to check out Tone Vase's YouTube channel. Now, changing gears, I want to remind you again that we do have an upcoming Ask Buck show where you can ask me about anything. You can even just make comments, but I do want you to participate. I want this to be part of your experience as well as mine, or try to get show involvement. Just go to wealthformula.com, and you'll see a little thing there that says leave a voicemail, and that's where you want to leave a question. We have some written questions, of course, but the verbal ones are kind of cooler. I think it's kind of fun to actually hear your voice. So make sure you go out there and ask some questions. And while you're there, you'll also see a link that says give us a 5-star review on iTunes. And if you do that, I'd be greatly indebted to you, because I think, it's those reviews that continue to give us the, high number of listeners, rank, and that, of course, helps us to continue to get high-quality guests on the show. With that all said, I will leave you for this week. This is Buck Joffrey signing off.
Thank you for listening to the Wealth Formula Podcast. Visit us on the web at wealthformula.com. The information contained in this podcast are opinions, not fact. As always, consult your own financial team before making any investment. See you next time.